If you guys can't already tell by my self-proclaimed title, I just really love comics. And since we're nearing the end of 2019, it's safe to say that this was just a really great year for comics, particularly new series. In the first half of 2019 alone, we were introduced and spoiled by some really great titles like Assassination, Darth Vader Dark Visions, and Kanto. Now, in the year's final stretch, we're being delivered with even more promising series. From literal entire planet robbing to a dystopian and isolated America, let's take a look at some of the latest first issues in a new series of videos I like to call New Series Roundup. Okay, so I'm not the most creative title creator, but I'm trying my best, guys. Now, you're not going to see any X-Men titles on this list from the recent Dawn of X, but that's merely because I'm saving it for its own little separate video, because that's just going to be a lot to unpack. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if someone took your favorite D&D character and wrote an entire comic about them? Well, that's exactly how I felt with the announcement of Krone from Dark Horse Comics. Krone, written by Dennis Culver and illustrated by Justin Greenwood, tells the story of the reclusive Krone, formerly known as Bloody Bliss, the champion of men, and her call to one last adventure. From the get-go, I was already sold on this concept. One of my favorite tropes in the world that is not utilized nearly enough is that of the older and hardened heroine and her call to action. Characters like Terminator's Sarah Connor, Overwatch's Anna Amari, and Legend of Korra's Lin Bei Fan are some of my faves, so it's really awesome to see another female character like this get her due. In Krone's first issue, we're met with a gorgeous introductory transition between past and present as we see Bloody Bliss in all her former glory, alongside her companions, all of which are reminiscent of other sword and sorcery characters like Conan the Barbarian and my personal favorite, Red Sonja. After a reunion with an old friend, we learn that the greatest enemy of Bloody Bliss has returned, and it's up to our title heroine to uncover the secrets of his arrival and stop him. While there isn't a whole lot to unpack in this first issue, in fact, my only real complaint is that it's entirely too short, it feels like more than enough to pull me in. Maybe it's just my personal connection and feelings toward the main character, but after its debut issue, I immediately added Krone to my pull list. Even with just its first issue, Krone already feels like a gorgeous mix between books like Sword Daughter and Red Sonja, two more titles I'm extremely fond of. Leading off with a darker and more horror-based tone, Basketful of Heads is the first series from DC Comics' new horror imprint Hill House Comics, with series like Dollhouse Family and Low Woods soon to follow. Created by Prince of Horror Joe Hill and Leo Max, Basketful of Heads revolves around the story of a young girl named June and her discovery and experience with an 8th century magical Norse axe, which is rumored to have the capability to cut through a man's neck with a single swipe. The catch? Despite decapitation, the head, once come into contact with the mystical weapon, is still very conscious and capable of inhuman speech. Sounds cool and freaky, right? Except, we don't see any of that aside from the first page. Instead, the debut issue revolves around June and her volunteer police officer boyfriend as they reunite and reflect on the events of their summer. It's only in the issue's final pages that we start to see some movement in the story's plot, as an unexpected break-in, assumedly from jailbreaking criminals we're alluded to earlier, strikes to drive the story forward. But even there, it ends so suddenly just as the story is getting good, and while I understand that this is what a comic does, it's supposed to hook and drag you in, it doesn't feel like there's enough of a first issue here to latch readers into it. Instead, it feels like every horror slasher film where the teenagers are just mucking around being teens, and all I really want is for the big bad guy to show up and start killing people. I wanted more of this, and less of this. We're already given a glimpse of the spooky killer axe in the issue, so as a reader, I can naturally assume where some of the events of issue 2 will be leading, so just give that to me now. Also, it's 2019, and while I understand Basketful of Heads draws much of its inspiration from 80s slasher films, not every one of your characters needs to look and feel like a slice of white bread. It's a shame, because I was really looking forward to what I hoped would be another great horror series, and it feels like if anyone could do it, it would be the son of horror icon Stephen King. Maybe I'm just being too harsh. Overall, I love the tone of Basketful of Heads, and the art from Leo Max is sublime. I'm hoping that in a collected trade format, the pacing won't come off nearly as slow and will show off some true horror brilliance. Time to add a splash of color onto this list. BB Free is an all-ages, all-new 12-issue miniseries from Gabby Rivera and Royal Dunlap, published by Boom Studios. You might already be familiar with Gabby Rivera and her previous work on Marvel's America, but for artist Royal Dunlap, this is their comic debut. This new series might actually be the cutest on this list with its vibrant colors and gorgeously stylistic art. Yet another series about a twisted dystopian future, one where the plague that ate greed took over. A small group of people have taken root in the swamp islands of Florida. Makes me wish I could get over my fear of gators so that I too can have a cute companion to travel the swamps with. Despite the pushback from her father, by the way, it's time for the hot dad alert! 14-year-old BB wants nothing more than to reach out to the rest of the world she's been isolated from. What better way to do that than a radio show with the help from your best friend? BB Free is a touching coming-of-age story featuring both a young Latina girl and a disabled woman of color. The representation in this book is just marvelous on all fronts. There's a cultural influence on this series, while both creators still manage to create a concept and world entirely their own. I also really love some of the language and shortened modern lingo throughout the majority of the issue's dialogue, which made it feel young and fresh while still staying relatable to an older crowd. We even see a few moments of wordplay and switch-ups when it comes to naughty language, very reminiscent of The Good Place.
Oh, fork, that's good.
BB Free is just one of those books that will put a smile on your face and is a tale that can be loved across generations. And that mystical, magical cliffhanger in the series' first issue will leave you on the edge of your seat wanting more. Horror comics, especially good horror comics, feel like a dime a dozen. The second title on this list from Boom Studios, Something is Killing the Children, is from the creative team of James Tynion IV and Werther Dell'Edera. In the small town of Archer's Peak, children are seemingly going missing without a trace. In the issue's first few pages, we're introduced to a young man named James who is forced to witness the slaughter of all of his friends by what he can only assume are horrific monsters lurking in the woods. But what happens when no one will believe in the monsters? Following the traumatic events, he's left in the aftermath of not only being the sole survivor of this tragedy, but also the accusations from his peers of his involvement. Things start to launch forward when a girl not much older than James shows up proclaiming to be a monster hunter. Tynion thrives when it comes to modern horror. With previous horror-esque titles like Justice League Dark and Constantine, this guy just gets it. Combined with the hauntingly beautiful art from Dell'Edera, Something is Killing the Children features an evenly paced narrative, shifting between action and exposition. That's just a joy from start to finish. Now, I normally don't talk about lettering in comics, which is probably something I should be doing more, seeing as how the letterers and designers are the unsung heroes of the industry. But in each issue of Something is Killing the Children, we're given a minimalistic splash page featuring the story's title. It's a small little touch that I really enjoy and makes me sit back and have a wow moment. Honestly, if you're a fan of Netflix's Stranger Things, then picking up this series feels almost like a no-brainer, as both properties tend to hold the same style and tone. This is the one title where, at the time of publishing this video, has 2 issues, but I can assure you that the greatness behind the creative team only continues. Undiscovered Country is up next. Published by Image Comics, written by Scott Snyder and Charles Soule, and illustrated by Giuseppe Camuncoli, Undiscovered Country ended up being the second best-selling launch title from the publisher, following Jupiter's Legacy, and ushered in an additional printing mere hours after its debut. That being said, I was a little hesitant about picking up this one. This is going to be one hot take, but I'm not the biggest fan of Scott Snyder's writing. His gritty and oftentimes dense perspectives is just not something I find myself enjoying. However, the promise of a new and exciting take on a dystopian future was just something I couldn't resist. In the near-distant future, the United States has chosen to literally wall itself off from the rest of the world. While the remaining nations face the deadly and inevitably world-ending threat, the Sky Virus, in a time of need, America has seemingly stretched out an invitation to a small group comprised of doctors, scientists, and explorers, with the promise of a solution and the first interaction anyone has had with the isolated country in almost 30 years. But things aren't as they seem, and when our group's plane is shot down, they're in for the fight of their lives to survive what the land of the free has become. There's some strange pacing between the past and the present in the series' opening pages, which often left me confused, forcing me to go back to what I had previously read, and that only made me feel like I was playing catch-up because I'd missed something. However, after suffering through the series' first few pages, we're thrust into a colorfully violent and exciting American landscape, and our first look at what just America has become. On a positive note, there's some really remarkable use and symbolism of American patriotism, including references to the American-made Cadillac and Mustang, the American bison, which Snyder and Soule deemed the king of the American plains, and of course the glaringly obvious metaphor on the issue's final page. I didn't exactly hate Undiscovered Country, but I didn't exactly love it either. I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with me on this one, and that's okay. Overall, I just feel like Undiscovered Country will be much more enjoyable in a completed format, so personally, I'll be foregoing its single issues in favor of its compiled trade release. I seriously can't get over what an amazing publisher Volt Comics is shaping up to be. Within the span of a year alone, they've managed to pump out amazing titles such as Sarah and the Royal Stars, She Said Destroy, and Money Shot. Heist, or Heist How to Steal a Planet from Paul Tobin and Arjuna Susini, joins the aforementioned mind-blowing series. If you ever wanted to know what a blend between Cowboy Bebop and Blade Runner would look like, then look no further than Volt Comics' newest series. Welcome to Heist, the crime capital of the neighboring system and populated by only the grimiest and cutthroat criminals of the entire galaxy. Sounds a lot like Omega from my favorite video game series, Mass Effect. After spending several years behind bars, once free, infamous conman Glane Breld decides to do what he does best. Only this time, his target is to steal an entire planet, literally. But he'll need a team, and of course his cast of choice is only the most dangerous men and women aside from himself. There's Celine, the dangerously craftful gunsmith, Gavil, a master of disguise, and Eddie Letts, an assassin who wants nothing more than to see the death of our main character. The actions and conversations between characters are oftentimes comically charming, and Paul Tobin exploits the inner dialogue of Glane to provide backstory and world building for the crime-filled planet. These monologues also serve another purpose, as oftentimes moments of dialogue and action, which might otherwise bog down the story's pacing, are foregone in favor of these soliloquies. While at times the art wasn't my favorite, Susini and Astone's raw and gritty lines and colors just work to help bring the planet Heist to life, and overall, I really enjoyed the designs of all these characters. Heist never has a dull moment, and I honestly never wanted to put the book down, and now I'm painstakingly waiting for the next issue. At the time of this video, most of these series are only on their first issue. In fact, all but one made their debut within the past week or so. So if I caught your attention with any of these titles, make sure to get in touch with your local comic shop. And if you love the first issue and want more, make sure to tell someone you'd like to add it to your comic subscriptions. Because at the end of the day, that's how to keep the industry going. And as always, happy reading!